Our panel this morning, the first panel today, is about connected technologies and what farmers really need. And I'm going to turn over the moderation to Tim Taylor. He is a former CEO of Valley Ag Software. And although he only has 5 years of experience in dairy, a lot of experience in technology, but he does now own cows. So they're beef cows, but he's a cow owner. I think that the industry has done that to him. So, Tim, I'll take it over for you to introduce your panel and for discussion.
Thanks, Walt. Yeah, one of the dairy farmers that's here on the panel later today, last night at dinner, he said, "Good for you, it's never too late to become a farmer." So here I am, 66 years old, bought my farm last year and happy to have beef cattle. So the panel today is a bunch of very distinguished, experienced guys from different aspects of the industry. It's kind of intimidating that almost all of them are doctors, DVMs, advanced degrees, and here I am, a Russian language guy from California. So I'm honored to be here in your presence, but honored to be part of the industry. And our topics today have to do with data connectivity and integration. In terms of pragmatic deployment of technology on dairy farms. There's a lot of technologies, as we saw earlier today. Great overview by Dr. Bewley. And you, as dairy farmers, have to sift through that and say, what's effective, what's easy to deploy, and what really works to make my dairy farm more efficient, more profitable, and higher quality. So the discussion today comes out of the insight that we've had in this tech world, where the connection of technologies and integration is the true force multiplier. 2 + 2 = 7 when applications work together. Like today when I ran down to the local Starbucks to grab a latte and I pay with my app, and when I get down to about $15, my app asks me, do you want to charge up another $50? That's done through a data connection called an API, or Application Program Interface. And so the data connections on all of these applications on farm is really how we make technology make 2 + 2 = 7 for the dairy farm. So we have some questions today for the audience that we'll ask and discuss as a panel. More than open for you guys to throw up a question on Huva as we're going along. And as long as it's not politically correct, then we'll answer your questions. And so let's get going. So we have some amazing guys. And by the way, before we ask questions, after a few questions, we'll start with a panelist coming up and just describing who he is and what he does, because it's always good to get the context. Well, what are you doing in the industry? Are you with a company? So we have an academic, which is leading an integration project called Dairy Brain, at Dr. Cabrera. Mark Thomas, who I met in Beijing a few years ago when I was at Valley Ag, is a veterinarian, has a consulting service, uses data at the highest level to help farms improve. Nick Jenkins is with Bovasync, who really gave me a run for my money when I was at Valley Ag because they were first to the cloud. Great company. And Nick is also a doctor. He's a data scientist. And Chip Donahoe is with a company called IOTA. He's chief product officer there, a technology guy, based in Colorado but moving to Florida in July. He likes humidity and heat, so they're heading down there in the next couple of weeks. So great group of guys. So Chip, before we get into questions, why don't you come up and give a quick overview of IOTA?
Next slide. All right, good morning. I love the concept of storytelling with data, so I have a few questions for you. You want to do the slide? Oh, I got the clicker. Sorry about that. What story is your data telling you? Are you listening to the correct story? And are you listening at all? So, real quick poll here, and we got a challenge. You don't have to raise your hands, but just answer these questions internally. How many of you are collecting data manually from different siloed systems and then entering them into a spreadsheet to determine how your farm is operating? Okay, we've seen that a lot. For those of you who do that, is that time consuming? Does it give you the information you need in order to make quick decisions? And if you find a problem, is it easy for you to drill down in order to understand where it is? So what if you could automatically collect all that data, put it into one place, and then turn it into actionable information that's available at your fingertips? So we hear a question or we hear a statement, is data the new oil? That's probably a debate and a talk for probably you could spend hours on. But data is valuable. It all depends on what you're going to do with it. You've heard a few speakers earlier today to discuss that. But you know, that's something that we can discuss and debate, is how important is that raw data. So, a few more questions for you. Are you using farm management systems? Herd management systems, feed management systems, parlor systems? If you're not, you really should consider those, as was mentioned earlier today. Those bring great value. Those companies, those point solutions are working really hard. They want to see you succeed. Are you taking advantage of wearables? But more importantly, what other things that you're not measuring on the farm that you can measure it? Pulling data from those siloed systems and combining it together allows you to look for hidden improvements that may unlock the gains you've been looking for. That's a long sentence, right? Okay, so let me give you a real-world example. We were working with a pilot farm on feed optimization. They were 42 milking head. They had a herd, a feed, and a parlor system. And we put a GPS sensor on their push-up tractor. It was a really cool unit. It could tell us where the tractor was at all time. Was it on? What direction it was going? What speed it was going? And we did this for a period of 4 months. So there were a few initial findings that were quite surprising. The first one was that the push-ups were only happening about 60% of the scheduled time, because we could find the truth from the sensor. They didn't realize that other tasks were being done and prioritized over the push-up. But the results after 4 months were a couple of things. Refusals were decreased by 2%, and there was several elements to why we were able to decrease it. And total milk was increased by 1%. So the outcome was $781,000 increase in annual profit calculated by the farm and extrapolated for the annual. So this result, these outcomes were the reason we were able to win the 2020 producer-led AgriNovus Challenge in Indiana. So our mission at IOTA is to collect their data and put it to work for you, the producer. Thank you.
Thanks, Chip. So the word data has been used like 1,000 times today, right? So is there a negative connotation or a positive connotation with the word data? Because when I go to dairy farms, you know, the first question I get is, who owns my data? Anybody asked themselves that question before? Yeah, for sure. So let me ask the panel, start with you, Chip. So who owns the data and who controls the data when data comes from an on-farm application into another platform or goes into that on-farm application and goes somewhere else? Do you want to come up here? Come on. Yes, we need better integration at the microphone level here.
All right, so I think this is a consensus among many data integrators right now, is that the data belongs to you, the producer. The challenge is now, if the data belongs to you, a lot of these data sources, or what we call data providers, are agreeing with that, but now they're starting to think that they control the access to that data. So in order to make it flow, we need to make sure that the producer has control over who gets to see it, who gets to use it, and how they're getting to use it. So the control needs to be in the hands of the producer, but it also was addressed this morning as far as a mindset that in order to not only improve your operation, but the entire operation of the industry, that data does need to flow and be put to work. So back to that, is data the new oil? Oil's only good if you're able to get it up out of the ground, right? So if you're sitting on your data and not putting it to work further than it already is, I don't want to imply that data hasn't been put to work by the point solution, but that it's critical that we allow access as an industry on your behalf, the producer.
Nick, you're a data scientist. Your platform has millions of cows on it. What are your thoughts on this issue?
Unfortunately, not a data scientist, just a lowly veterinarian. I think that the producers should have control over their data. I think it gets a little bit more complicated than that, just like you see with everyone here with their smartphones and their social media accounts and things like that. The data goes somewhere and then it gets used in such a way. I think of it like baking a cake. You know, you have the separate ingredients that you have control over, but when you use that information to create algorithms and insights that can be extrapolated to other information, you lose some of the control of that granular data as it becomes part of a bigger whole. From Bovasync's standpoint, it's certainly a big factor in our business model, making sure that people have control over their data and are able to share or revoke access to it whenever they do feel that need. But I do think it is a little bit, you know, it's worth a bigger discussion of, like, it's easy to say just, oh, like, the producer owns their data, but, you know, we give away our data all the time, every moment of the day, and the key is, do we get enough of a return on what we're giving away to justify that use?
Thanks, Nick. Mark, you're in an interesting position because in your profession as a consultant, you take data from Dairy Comp, Bovasync, all the other applications, put them into your platform, which is a database, and then you provide insights to help farmers get more efficient. What's your perspective in your relationship with your clients on the issue of data?
So thanks, Tim. Certainly and our philosophy is the data is owned by the dairy, and that's a real charge to all of you to really think about who has access to your data. You know, there's still lots of folks who step onto dairies with a pen drive and say, can I take a backup? So I challenge you to think, why? What do you need that data for? So when data is requested from our clients, we can provide data to other groups, but we provide the data that's needed. We don't just give an entire backup, okay? Because that has a lot of information. So again, backups are everything. Would you give your QuickBooks backup to just anyone? Probably not. You maybe need to give some financial information to different groups to get a new account or what have you, a loan, but you're not going to give your QuickBooks backup. Think of your dairy data in the same way.
Victor, what are your thoughts on data, data control, data privacy?
Very good. So first of all, I would like to mention categorically that I do think it's not only our perception, I do think the data belongs to the farmer, no matter what. I mean, there are some attempts to gray line that idea by simple things like, for example, doing a simple calculation on a data. We all know we can collect data on the birth of an animal, and if the software calculates what the age of the animal, there is a simple calculation on that, and there may be claims that since I did that calculation, the data becomes part of the software or the company. But I think we need to be very clear that the data originally was collected from the farm and should belong to the farmer. And under that condition, I think we need to be very clear how this data is going to move towards the decision process and how that data can provide value to the farmer. Now, saying that, I think it's great that we think all and agree that the data belongs to the farmer, but also I agree with Chip very clearly that we need to share those data, otherwise we are not going to realize all the value that's contained on the data. We have heard this morning, data by itself doesn't tell us anything. It needs to become information, and in order to reach that point, we need to connect with other data streams, and we need to produce decisions that are going to help to the farmer. Within the dairy brain, we have collaborated with lawyers in order to tackle the issues of confidentiality, which is another thing we need to think when we talk about data ownership and data privacy in general. And actually one thing that resonates on me is what one of the lawyers mentioned, that looking at all the regulations in the agricultural industry in general, and specifically in dairy farms, it seems the Wild West, because every single company and every single initiative will have a different guidelines and rules. As an academic institution, the university, every time we request and use data from farmers or companies, we produce a new data transfer agreement, and each one is different. And that's becoming more cumbersome every time we need to use data. So one thing we propose is to work all together towards, for example, to a bill of rights of data in the agriculture and specifically in the dairy industry.
Yeah, great point. When we put together the Vila app last year, we had a dairy say, well, can you add a feature to your platform that allows me to see who I'm sharing my data with and allow me to turn it off or turn it on? I'm like, perfect, we did that. So great input from a farmer, because he knows that all of his applications, whether it's Easy Feed or Dairy Comp, the data is going somewhere, but he lost track of who he had shared it with. And this is a really good pragmatic suggestion. Victor, tell us about Dairy Brain. What is it? It's not my brain, because I'm not a dairy brain for sure, but you've got a dairy brain. Tell us about it.
I mean, the way I think about Dairy Brain is an engine that is going to provide us better insights, and I think it's going to improve greatly decision-making on dairy farms. And it taps in what we are discussing this morning, integrating data on a continuous way and in real time. So that's in simple. I do have more slides. I'm going to talk about more specifically about the Dairy Brain, but that's the core. And actually, most of our work so far has been in the integration domain of the data. At the same time, we are working on, decision support tools, as simple as dashboards and as complicated as sophisticated machine learning algorithms that are going to give us better insights and improve decision making if, in this case, if we tap into the value of the integrated data. We all have known of the value of using one technology or another technology, those wearables, for example, and it's clear and it is documented the value they produce. Think about how much more the value would be if we connect that device with the management software of the farm efficiently and together with the feed system that's working on the farm. But that should be, in a continuous and in real time.
I'm showing your slides as you're speaking. I hope that's okay. Do you want to show them?
Sure, can I go to
Come
those?
on up, yeah.
Oh,
That's your first one.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tim. So we are, as I was saying, we are looking for improved management and greatly improved management by tapping at data collected on the farms through this efficient system of integrating all of them and providing the integrated data to our analytical systems. So the bottom line is, our proposal is to add value to all this data, but when this is integrated. And we define that to the Dairy Brain engine. So at the heart of the dairy brain is the integration of the data. And actually, we tap on all the systems that are already working on the farm. And we have the management system, we have the milking parlor system, we have the feed system, for example. And the idea is to access this data efficiently, decode the data, clean the data, homogenize the data, and at the end, efficiently integrate this data. So the data are available for important decision-making tools and models, like, for example, in this case, we can improve diet accuracy on farms, and actually very related to the way the business is being done on farms. And here's an example that is documented, and it is published, actually, in which we can improve the diet accuracy in order to improve the net gain on a farm of more than $200 per cow per year if we just follow the practice that the farmer is doing about moving cows across different pens. But our proposal value here is simply to change a little bit the reallocation of cows to the pens, to have more alike nutritionally cows in these pens, and tweak a little bit the diet once we have that. So that's, I think, an important way to add value to the data. Now we can also tap into this integrated data value, and we can put together machine learning algorithms to predict what will be the chance of having mastitis for a cow that is born or in the next lactation in the long term. But we can do the same, actually, using more daily or readily available data on a continuous basis to predict what would be the chance of a cow getting mastitis in the next few days. So we have done that, it's documented, there is a paper about that, and it is ready to be connected with the integrated data. The accuracy of these models will only keep improving as we have more data into the pipeline and the process continues on the farms. We also have documented of the value of the integrated data together with, for example, this nice social network analysis, in which tapping into having these dairy farms nowadays more of automatic milking systems and the electronic gates, we can actually know the location of the cows of the passage through these gates and know how close are one cow with the others. So we can define the affinity of one cow to the rest of the cows. And based on that, actually, we can find out what's the impact of losing that affinity and how that impacts production. We have evidence, and this is also published, that cows that lose the affinity in these systems may have lower production, and it is very consistent. Not only that, they will have a much more variability in their production as they lose their affinity with other cows. So what the future holds regarding data integration? I think Jeff Bewley did a very nice job early in the morning. I think this is gonna change the way dairy farms operate. I think this is transformational, and it is a paradigm shift that we are gonna improve decision making. Either if we put all the technologies or less technologies, but I think the important point we wanna remember here is that we connect all this data efficiently for better decision making. But in order to do so, we need a concerted effort that will include the farmer, the companies, and the academia. Thanks.
Thanks, Victor. So for the guys on the stage, you're all technology people, but in very pragmatic sense, we're helping farmers and the industry improve. What are the challenges for taking on-farm data and getting it into a visualization and decision-making format? Chip?
Well, I would say two thoughts. First one is the timeliness of data entry. We've heard lots of stories of producers being so busy, right, that you enter in all of your events into your herd management system the day before test day. And that provides a challenge. So timeliness of data entry is a big, big deal. Your feed management system, if it's integrated with your herd management system, is dependent on making sure you get moves in the day that it happens, or your feed management system is not going to feed the appropriate number of cows. So timeliness is probably the most important thing. The next challenge is the quality of the data. Dr. Overton really pointed to this. That is really a big challenge for every different data provider. We need to pay attention closely to what types of data anomalies we can run into and screen that data and determine what are anomalies and what needs to be done with them. We don't want to throw that data out, but it needs to be tagged. So making sure that we're not impacting analysis.
Yeah, good one. Nick?
Combining data from different siloed sources can be a mess if we're being kind. The variation in different data types, the formatting, access are all really big limitations on taking data from a variety of different systems and putting it together so that you can make better choices or ask better questions to then make better choices. The main problem that I found is, like Chip was saying, those are definitely big factors. I think anything that can move the input of data closer to the actual event that's being recorded. So like Bovisync would say, we have the Android app, so you move your data input cow side or hopefully automate it in some way. That way you're relying less on paper and human interaction to input the data, makes for helpful situations. But I think it also just comes down to there's so many different technologies and sources of information like we've seen in some of the presentations earlier today, and they have very different formats to their data that need to be cleaned up and remove outliers and get it into a massaged situation where it can be put into something that looks at the big picture. And that takes a lot more effort than I think you would expect when you're just thinking about like, oh, I have 2 or 3 systems that need to be put together and maybe I'll throw weather in there. It sounds like it would be something that's easy, but it tends to be a lot messier than it is in theory.
Mark, you're dealing with pragmatic use of data every day. Why don't you answer the question from up here and then introduce your company? Come on up here and use this mic, would you?
Great, thanks, Tim. So a really important question. And what I'd say is there has to be a human in the link of that process. We can take a backup, okay? We can take a backup from many farms of various softwares and look at that data, but do we know what events are used to record basic animal health events, mastitis, pneumonia, and so forth? Are they recorded? What are treatment events? What do those treatment events mean? So yes, is the data correct, but it may be very correct, but we're interpreting it wrongly because we don't know what the dairy does. So hopefully a little bit of an oversight. What I talk about here will give you some insight how we use that. So dairy health, so we use a lot of data, but a little bit different than the other folks who are sitting here. We're a dairy consulting group. I'm a veterinarian by training, but we're a group of veterinarians, PhDs, nutritionists who consult with dairy clients. And 10 years ago when we formed Dairy Health, one of my partners, Matt Curler, really sharp veterinarian, self-learned data scientist, said, if we're going to be able to consult with our dairies, we have to have really good data. And we started along the path of compiling data from various sources. And we're still at it today. And as Nick said, it is a mess. It can be a mess. And these are clients we work with every day. So our main goal is working with our clients to make the dairy profitable, enhance productivity, and really longevity in the marketplace. That's the key. We don't want to come in and fix a one problem, milk quality problem, and see you later, call us when you have an issue. It's every day through knowledge generation, what can we do differently? And it's the philosophy of database decision making and really holding to that to the extent that we don't have an issue saying we don't know. We're not the guru consultants. If we don't know, probably no one knows, but let's find out through data and research. Okay? So I'm going to give you a quick overview of our model. So we provide consulting in really all areas of dairy production, animal health. So we have nutrition and feeding, animal health, reproduction, and then what we call production enhancement. And we have created, like some of my colleagues here, a data warehouse, a system by which data daily from various sources on the dairy, whether these be herd management such as DairyCom Bovasync, feed management software, parlor software, feed into our data warehouse and is replicated. Given this, we don't have a dashboard or reporting tool that's available to our clients. We use that data internally for reporting and also a lot for our research program. So a large part of what we do is research. About 60% of that research is on-farm research. That's directly questions that come up with the client within our group. And then about 40% of that is sponsored research that we do with animal health, animal feed supplement companies, and so forth. Okay, so the first pass would be a question comes up, and we really avoid first principles. Well, we think this based on that, because a lot of times we're wrong. So the first pass is, okay, what's available in the literature? Is there something in the literature that gives us insight to make this decision? And if so, is it relevant? Is it relevant geographically? Is it relevant for the management style we have? We work with clients from Northeast to California to Torreon, Mexico, where I live, and obviously the rations in those areas, the management are very different. When we don't have an answer, then we work to do a commercial trial with randomized groups, treatment and control. We've been able to create that infrastructure on most, not all of our dairies. There's some dairies that can't manage a research trial, but many of them can. And what's really cool is we work with lots of companies for the innovation. So companies that are here today that have lots of exciting innovation. So we're able to trial those things on our client sites and know in advance what the outcomes will be. What's really important for the dairy? It's health, okay, so morbidity and mortality. It's feed efficiency, which is directly related to milk production, and then reproduction. And what's probably even more important is it's not the biological outcomes only, it's the economic outcomes. So maybe this feed additive gives more milk, maybe this synchronization program gives higher fertility, but if it's not at least a 2-to-1 return or more for your dairy, then it shouldn't be recommended. Or worse yet, you're doing things on your dairy that are detrimental. You're paying for a product, and some of these are very, very commonly used vaccines, products, protocols on the dairy, and it's not neutral, it's actually detrimental. This, of course, leads back to more questions and more research, but more importantly is this develops the protocols, the recommendations that we have. So the treatment recommendations and so forth are based on real data, and they change, they're dynamic, because as we have more information, we can update those. So for someone to say, well, gee, you're changing your protocol from last year, absolutely. We have more data, we have more information. I think a great example is how was COVID treated 2 years ago to compare to how it's treated now? It's data, okay? Unfortunately, people died in the process to gain that data, as do animals to understand what we need to do. Like others here, we're replicating that data. I won't go through this in detail. The process is really similar to what Victor described, is taking that data and through different processes bringing that into a centralized data warehouse where we can use that for reporting and for our research program also. So thanks, and look forward to further conversation here.
Thanks, Mark. Great stuff. Torreon, great dairies, great food. Yeah,
Super
nice.
hot.
Yeah. So we have a question from the audience. Thank you for putting that in. So it's about software and technology costs to the producers? How do we make it practical, cost effective, but also how do we make it work when most of the software companies are moving from the old model of charging one time plus maintenance, now moving to SaaS or software as a service model where you charge by the cow or some other, reference point that allows the seller to, benefit from a recurring revenue stream. How do we make that cost effective and provide a return to the dairy farmers? Chip?
Well, it always comes down to, here's that buzz term, value propositions. The question really comes down to is a return on investment, right? So if you don't feel like that you're getting value or you cannot get value for that price, then obviously it's not worth it. So example, what may seem like it's expensive as far as a price tag on a month-to-month basis may end up netting you 4x, 5x, 10x on that. So the question comes down to, is it worth spending a little bit of money in order to make more? Or the question might be time. If it's saving you time, which in your mind might be money, right? Is that worth it? So it really comes down to an ROI. I think it's really the important thing is providers such as all of us sitting up here, that we need to make sure that it is affordable to you. I like what Dr. Bewley said about we need to stop having 6-digit solutions and start having less expensive solutions in order to drive profit on the farms.
What do you think, Nick?
I think it really comes down to the individual and what they feel their return on investment is. Like we talked earlier about like intuition and data-driven decisions, some of the things we can justify the cost of the technology with the actual dollar return from a change in management or increase in productivity or increased efficiency. But I do think a lot of it does come down to is the thing that the technology doing giving you personally value that you feel is appropriate for the cost that you're paying. So for a dairyman that is going, wants to go on vacation and be able to check in on the herd data because it's cloud-based, and they can check in on how everything is going there. That is a value that doesn't necessarily have a solid financial return on it, but there is a benefit to that. Much like the benefits to robots, you can save on labor and things like that, but there's also a time and lifestyle benefit or consideration that is more valuable to some producers than others. And from our perspective, the costs that we're charging are necessary to keep the process supported and then growing more functionality and more things that can be used down the line. But I think from an individual decision basis, you have to kind of evaluate what the technology is going to be giving you and weigh that out in your mind and not necessarily rely on the anecdotal benefits that the salespeople will tell you about how much money you'll make back. Because as we know in the nutrition world, if you fed all the additives, you would be, at what, 250 pounds a cow probably? So you just have to look at it in your big picture.
Mark, you're not selling software or technology, you're using it, recommending certain technologies to your farmers, your clients. How do you relate to them on suggesting how the model should work?
Yeah, so great question, and we could talk about this for the whole afternoon. It's of zero value if you don't do something different. You don't use that to make a decision. So, I cut my teeth as a young veterinarian, often getting invited to the breakfast table after herd check And how many of you here, you don't need to raise your hand, can say that the thick DHI envelope sat on the kitchen table until somebody opened it, right? And I would often say, you're paying for DHI every month and it's not cheap. And until I come here to have some breakfast with you and coffee, now we're opening the package, right? And to Chip's point about timely use of data. So it's of zero value if you don't use it. Mike Overton's presentation really hit home on this. Then the overinterpretation of data. How many times do we look at data and we say, oh, look at this technician is doing a poor job, or we have increased incidence of some disease, when it's not real. It's some perception, okay, or it's incorrect interpretation of the data. So as we get more and more data, we need to be really careful that we're interpreting that data correctly. So don't pay for anything if you and your consultants, your colleagues aren't going to use it, is the bottom line. It has to have value. And then I think, where do you really get value? It's from minimizing protocol drift. So can you use that data to track compliance? Because on every dairy in this room, we know that things aren't done to the exact way that you expect them to be done. And that varies by size. And if you are the one doing it, you yourself know that maybe you don't do it correctly. So I think that's where data can really help.
Protocol drift. I hadn't heard that before. It's a good one. Victor, so you come at it from an academician standpoint. Can we pay by the cow, by the month for the dairy brain?
Yes and no. It will, like in many things, it will depend. I will agree completely. Everyone that preceded me mentioned return on investment is the baseline in which we should base our decision according to software or hardware, right? Many times this software will be attached with the hardware, and that would be a different decision if it is only a software. If it is a subscription base and we are not finding value of the software, we can stop the subscription. If we have this attached to a hardware, it's much more difficult decision because we need to think twice before we enter into the innovation. But mentioning the return on investment, having worked for a long time on product value in many areas of management in dairy farm, and also alluding to the nice talk that Mike Overton had in the morning, I can tell that this could become a very subjective analysis of the return on investment, right? We used to do normally sensitivity analysis to see what's actually the value of a new technology or a software that you're gonna use, but we know that depends a lot on the market conditions, on the management that's changing because of other factors. Even the weather conditions will change, and the climate, the global warming will impact on all those decisions. So I think it is important, on one side, try to trust the best research out there, and try to have a good experience from previous developments of that company or that institution, and I think it's important the trust on that sense. And I mean, like anything we do nowadays with the apps, let's try and hopefully we can change as we move forward, depending on the value of that proposition with the app or the software.
Thanks, Victor. Hey, we have another question from the audience. See if I can read it. I'll squint here. So touch base to different formats of data. What do you see in the future having to standardize, streamline data that integrates systems and proposals to achieve that integration of data? Nick, you're a perfect guy to address that issue, because BovaSync, there's a lot of complexity to herd management software. I experienced that at Valley Ag. You know, we were all on premise and then had to go to the cloud. And a lot of the farmers would just say, hey, stay on premise, would you? Because I don't have great internet access. BovaSync was first to the cloud, but there's a lot of data coming into BovaSync from how many different applications? How do you guys make that work?
Yeah, it certainly is a challenge, especially when you get into the the limitations that we had discussed before in multiple discussions about internet access and things like that. the key going forward is going to be the desire of companies to want to cooperate with one another, have API access between companies so that data can be shared back and forth in a relatively seamless manner. Right now, there is not a ton of that. There is a lot of exporting of files and importing of files and manual cleaning and stuff like that, which is a big problem when you come to things. It doesn't take much to have one of those tools break to then cause a problem with the end result that you've created that integrated them all. So I think I'm not like overly optimistic that everyone's going to get on the same page and have everything work together like super hunky-dory. I feel like there's going to need to be a fair bit more consolidation so that there are some companies that have kind of a full stack of services that they control and can manage the integrations, which then has other problems associated with, different walled garden versus open access options. And I think it's going to come down to what producers are asking for and want for their dairies to make a marketplace that does it. The problem that I think we kind of beat around the bush of a lot is we talk about productivity and profitability, and we use these tools to achieve varying goals that are not always clearly defined. We're very good at finding ways to solve clear problems, but when there are big things that we're saying, oh, we want to help with sustainability. Well, what exactly does that mean? We want to help with productivity. Well, what does that mean to one producer over another? Until we have more focus on what exactly the things that we need to change are, that will then guide us to how to better use the technologies that are there toward that more specific goal, in my perception of it at least.
Victor, how do we tackle the pragmatics of making applications integrated on farms?
I think, great question, Tim. I think there are many factors, many targets moving around that. I think one important thing is related to the proposition value, right? I mean, everyone in the chain should have some benefit. Otherwise, there is no motivation to share the data. We have experience with many companies. They are very willing and very helpful on trying to share the data, but they don't have the means, they don't have the bandwidth of people to actually help us to do that work. And we all know, as Nick was mentioning, I mean, the data comes in a human-readable format. We need to convert that to a computer-readable format in real time, all the time, continuously. When they change something and they are not going to tell us and they are not going to consult on us on changing that, obviously it will disrupt all our workflow. And therefore, if they have a stake into the whole value chain, they will be more likely to collaborate with us and work across the system in order to have a more smooth system of data transfer across all the systems. The last thing I will mention about that, and I think it's a great point Tim did before, I think we should look towards APIs, these application programming interfaces, the modern way in which we can share data very efficiently. And I think a big part of these, and some ones who will have a lot of stake and a lot to say on that, would be you, the farmers. I mean, if you're willing to work with us in this, you have the power to actually push the industry and the vendors and the companies to actually make those data available to other services.
One last question, and we're almost done. Can farmers monetize their data? Chip, what do you think?
Yes, I think they can, in the big picture.
Nick?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if companies want access to farms' data, they either need to provide enough benefit to them to justify it or pay for it.
Take Apple Pay and people will pay you for it. Mark, what do you think? Can they sell their data? Can they monetize? Perhaps.
Depending on the quality of the data and lots of factors, yes.
Victor?
I think it's already data is a commodity, and I mean, it has a value, and I don't see why not farmers should monetize on that.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank the panelists. It was great discussion, not an easy topic, but very important. Thanks, guys, for taking your time today, and thank you guys for listening. So thanks a lot.